All right, today we are putting a really fascinating and sometimes pretty deadly family of bacteria right under the microscope. We're diving into the genus Neisseria. So let's just start with a question. What looks kind of like a pair of coffee beans snuggled up together, but is also responsible for a major sexually transmitted disease and a super dangerous form of meningitis? Well, the answer is the star of our show today, the Neisseria bacterium. So here's our game plan. First up, we're going to meet the whole family in the lineup. Then we'll check out a pathogen's arsenal to see what makes them tick. After that, we'll focus on the two main culprits before we head into the laboratory investigation. And we'll wrap things up by looking at how we're fighting a growing threat.
Okay, let's get our investigation started. It is time to meet the Neisseria family.
So what exactly is a Neisseria? Well, it's a type of gram-negative bacteria. Now, that's a key lab term that just tells scientists it has a thin cell wall, which is super important for figuring out how to fight it. And when you look at them under a microscope, they almost always hang out in pairs. We call that diplococci, with their sides flattened against each other. And that's what gives them that classic, you guessed it, coffee bean shape. Another big clue for the lab techs, they're all oxidase positive, which is just a fancy way of saying they make a certain enzyme that lights up in a test, helping to pinpoint them. Now, here's where the family tree really splits. You see, most Neisseria species are totally harmless. They're what we call commensals. They just live in our mouths and throats, minding their own business. But then, you've got the two black sheep of the family. The primary pathogens, Neisseria gonorrhea and Neisseria meningitidis. And these two are a whole other story. So what makes these two so different? What gives them the power to be so destructive? To figure that out, we have to look at their arsenal. We're talking about their virulence factors, basically the special tools and weapons they use to break into our bodies, dodge our immune systems, and make us sick. And they are packing some serious heat. They've got pili, which are like tiny grappling hooks, a protective capsule that acts like an invisibility cloak, a nasty endotoxin that poisons our system, a special enzyme, IgA1 protease, that actually shreds our antibodies, and these OPA proteins that help them get a death grip on our cells. But let's zoom in on their two most important weapons. First up, the pili. Seriously, just picture microscopic grappling hooks. These little hairs let the bacteria latch onto our cells, especially in the throat or genital tract, so they don't get flushed out. They even help them avoid getting eaten by our immune cells. And here's the key takeaway. If a strain of N. gonorrhea doesn't have these pili, it's completely harmless. They are absolutely non-negotiable for causing an infection. Now, for the other bad guy, N. meningitidis, its ace in the hole is the capsular polysaccharide. You can think of this as a slimy protective shield. It basically makes the bacterium super slippery, so our immune system's defenders can't get a good grip on it to destroy it. This shield is a huge reason why this bacterium can survive in our bloodstream and then make the jump into our nervous system. Okay, so we know what they're armed with. Now let's open up the case files on our two prime suspects and see exactly what kind of damage they do. And here they are, side by side. On one hand, you have Neisseria gonorrhea, the cause of the STD gonorrhea. On the other, Neisseria meningitidis, which causes deadly bacterial meningitis and a nasty blood infection called meningococcemia. Same family, but wow, two very different and very serious paths of destruction. Looking at the gonorrhea case file, the impact is broad. In men, the classic sign is a painful infection of the urethra. In women, though, it can be much more sinister. It can start in the cervix and move upwards, causing pelvic inflammatory disease, or PID, which can lead to scarring, infertility. It's really serious stuff. And it's not just a genital infection. It can also set up shop in the rectum and throat. And maybe most tragically, an infected mother can pass it to her baby during birth, causing a severe eye infection that can lead to blindness if it's not caught right away. The way M. meningitis progresses is, frankly, terrifying. It often starts without a whisper, just hanging out in the back of your nose and throat with no symptoms at all. But then it can make a break for it and invade the bloodstream. That's meningococcemia. You get a fever, a telltale rash, and from there it can cross into the nervous system and cause meningitis. All the while, it's releasing that powerful endotoxin, which can send the body into shock and cause catastrophic organ failure, a condition called Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome. It's an absolute medical emergency. So when a doctor suspects one of these infections, how do they get a positive ID on the culprit? Well, that's when the case moves from the clinic to the lab. And in the lab, it's a step-by-step process. It all starts with getting a sample, A swab for gonorrhea or for meningitis, it's blood or spinal fluid. Then it's straight to the microscope. The gram stain gives them their first big clue. They're looking for those gram-negative coffee bean-shaped pairs, often hiding out inside the patient's own white blood cells. Then they have to actually grow the bacteria, which are pretty picky eaters, on special nutrient-rich plates. And the final, definitive proof comes from a few biochemical tests. And this brings us to the coolest and most important test that tells these two apart. How do you distinguish between these two dangerous cousins? You see what kind of sugar they like to eat. It's that simple. Both of them can break down or ferment glucose, but only N. meningitis can also handle maltose. It's a clean, elegant way to make the final call, and it's absolutely crucial for getting the patient on the right treatment. So that brings us to the final part of our investigation. We've identified our culprits, we know their MO, so how do we fight back? And what does the future hold? For a long time, our go-to weapon has been antibiotics. For gonorrhea, drugs like ceftriaxone are the current recommendation. For something as life-threatening as meningitis, the response is way more aggressive. We're talking powerful IV antibiotics for up to 2 weeks. But there's a huge problem. Our best weapon is starting to fail. You see, for years, you could treat gonorrhea with the simple penicillin, but the bacteria are smart. They evolved. Strains started popping up that produce something called penicillinase. It's an enzyme that just chews up the penicillin molecule, making it totally useless. This isn't some far-off threat. Antibiotic resistance is here, and it's a growing crisis. And that really leaves us with the big, final question. These coffee bean bacteria, they're constantly changing, constantly upgrading their defenses against our best drugs. So the question we have to ask is, are our medical arsenals, our scientific strategies, evolving fast enough to keep up in this microscopic arms race?